Xtalks connects professionals in the life science, medical device, and food industries with useful content like webinars, job openings, articles, and virtual meetings to help you succeed in your career. This life science focused podcast brings together some of our editorial staff to share insights into the latest B2B industry news to keep you up to date. Xtalks is excited to introduce the inaugural issue of Xtalks Clinical Edge, where innovation meets expertise. This digital magazine offers you exclusive conversations with some of the brightest minds and trendsetters of the clinical trials community, offering you a front row seat to the evolving landscape of clinical research. As you dive into the rich content of Xtalks Clinical Edge magazine's first issue, you'll discover insights from pharmaceutical companies, patient advocacy groups, leading clinical research organizations, and an ensemble of key opinion leaders from organizations like the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative and the Mayo Clinic. Follow the link in the show notes or visit clinicaledge.xtalks.com/issue1 to dive into the first issue of Xtalks Clinical Edge magazine and be a part of the conversation shaping the next era of clinical trials. That's clinicaledge.xtalks.com/issue1.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. I'm Vera Kovacevic, Editor-in-Chief at xtalks.com. And this week, I'm delighted to introduce a very special guest on the show. Today, we have with us Punit Dhillon, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Skye Bioscience, a pharmaceutical company developing proprietary molecules to treat diseases involving inflammatory, fibrotic, and metabolic conditions. Punit will speak to us about some of the innovation and work happening at Skye Bioscience. So welcome to the show, Punit. We're very excited to have you on.
Hey, thanks, Vera. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Great. So to start us off, could you share your journey leading up to your role as CEO at Skye Bioscience and how your previous experiences have shaped your vision for the company?
That's a great question. Well, I've been in the life sciences space or in the industry for approximately 20 years. I started in the buy side working for a fund as an analyst and then worked in the corporate finance area. Then I moved into the operations side, worked for a pharmaceutical company, then back again into kind of different deal making, and now most recently back in an operating role. So I am, I think it's been quite exciting in terms of being on different roles and different parts of the business. I think all the way, having had lens into seeing the different types of medicines and different therapeutic areas. I've been involved in the cancer vaccine area, cancer immunotherapy area, and now tackling ophthalmology as well as these metabolic disorders. So there's a lot of different interesting opportunities, and when you're working on these transformational medicines, I think overall what I've learned, it's a tough industry and you need resilience. So I think I've certainly appreciated the development process of focusing on what drugs have to offer. There's also I think at this point in my career, I have a better appreciation for looking at, when we're doing drug development, looking at the market opportunity and how a drug fits into the treatment paradigm, as well as what are we trying to focus on with such drugs or any new medicines in terms of what that target product profile looks like. So I think a better appreciation for that than early on in my career, because early on, I think I was really just looking at things that, okay, you're trying to disrupt the space or disrupt having a new treatment in a disease category, but not necessarily that it's not necessarily that all drugs get well adopted. And having most recently been in the cancer immunotherapy space, I think I saw that firsthand. We had the case of like Dendreon, which was the first next generation immunotherapy developed for prostate cancer, and it didn't really take off as everyone anticipated, although it was a big benchmark for the industry. So I think everyone talks about data, safety, efficacy, as being very clear components of winning. I think, to be realistic, there's additional market dynamics that have a much better appreciation now that been in the industry for a few decades.
Great. Yeah. And can you tell us more about Skye Bio's mission and the therapeutic approach at the company?
Yeah, so Skye is focused on developing therapies that are targeting the endocannabinoid system. Particularly, we're focused on the CB1 receptor, and we're addressing different diseases targeting that receptor and modulating that particular receptor. So very broadly, that's targeting diseases that are inflammatory or fibrotic, that are involved in the metabolic process, as well as the neurodegenerative side, like we are in glaucoma. But specifically in clinical development, we are developing two different drugs, one a drug for glaucoma and the other drug for obesity and chronic kidney disease, and specifically chronic kidney disease patients that are obese.
And for those of us who are unfamiliar, can you elaborate a little bit more about the endocannabinoid system and what is its significance?
Yeah, the endocannabinoid system's pretty fascinating. Again, used that comparison against the cancer immunotherapy side, or the cancer immunity cycle. A lot of people got familiar with that over the last decade. Well, the endocannabinoid system is also like this complex cell signaling system, and it's found in the body, and it plays a crucial role in a wide range of different physiological processes. So everything from what's called like kind of maintaining the homeostasis in the body, but it also affects people's mood and appetite and sleep, and it has components related to immune function or even pain. So there's a lot of different roles that it can play in terms of diseases. Endocannabinoids are really naturally occurring compounds. They're produced in the body, and they're similar structure to cannabinoids that are found in the cannabis plant. And that's where sometimes people get confused. It just happens to be that they're called the same. And the two well-known endocannabinoids are anandamide and 2-AG. So we're focusing particularly on a one particular receptor. So these cannabinoid receptors, they're proteins found on the surface surface of cells throughout the body. And the one that we're particularly targeting is cannabinoid receptor 1, or what's abbreviated as CB1. And that's the one that we're working on in terms of modulation. And CB1 is found all throughout the body. It's primarily found in the CNS, but it's also in a lot of different tissues around the body. And we can modulate that by inhibiting that function or activating what that CB1 is involved in terms of the physiological process that we're trying to create for disease management.
Yeah, great. I'm glad that you mentioned how the name is similar to, cannabinoids. So thank you for clarifying that. And, I haven't heard of a lot of pharmaceutical companies focusing on the endocannabinoid system. Is this a relatively new area of focus, and what inspired Skye Biosciences to take this route?
Yeah, I think historically, I would say that it is a fairly nascent area for development. So there has been now over the last decade a lot more research in the area, because it's a relatively newly discovered therapeutic area that people are focusing on new medicine. So we certainly had a broader appreciation for it. I had an opportunity to be exposed to this particular path for new medicine, and we established a development rationale around CB1 modulation. We purposely kind of chose CB1 because there's actually some very strong clinical validation in that area, particularly in the diseases that we're working on. So although it's a very newly discovered system, CB1 modulation has actually been utilized in the different diseases that we're focused on. And what we've done is really tried to be deliberate about how do we actually make drugs that can make a difference for patients in the different areas that we're working on. So, and then what's been interesting most recently is actually we've seen a fair amount of other activity in the marketplace that has translated, that larger pharma has been very keen on this particular pathway. There's been some notable acquisitions in the overall endocannabinoid space and specifically in the CB1 space. And it's kind of recapitulating kind of the interest that was there. About two decades ago, a majority of large pharma was actually focused on modulating the CB1 receptor and actually focusing on metabolic related diseases, including obesity. And then they kind of moved away from that because of specific safety concerns that arose. This next generation of drug development has really tried to improve on that and get around some of the previous safety concerns. And now, yeah, I think it's been nice to see some large M&A deals that have taken place over the last 2 years by a big pharma entering into this space.
And let's talk a little bit more specifically about the work that Skye Bioscience is doing. So can you tell us about how the company's lead programs are differentiated? And can you maybe talk about the mechanism of action of some of these products in development?
Yeah, that's great. So we have two different programs, two different drug candidates. One is known as SBI 100 ophthalmic emulsion, which is a CB1 agonist or activator, and it's being developed for glaucoma and ocular hypertension. And the other is referred to as nimacimab, which is a CB1 inhibitor. It's actually a antibody that is inhibiting the functions of the signaling of CB1, and we're developing that drug for targeting chronic kidney disease and obesity. So two different mechanisms, two different approaches. The glaucoma drug is a topical drug, so it's an eye drop that is developed that the patient would be self-administering as an eye drop into the eye, and then the other is in subcutaneous injection. The antibody is being developed as a subcutaneous injection, also self-administered, and both have a very interesting drug profile and a safety profile. Both programs have concluded phase 1 studies, and we're moving them into phase 2 programs now.
Oh, nice, interesting. And can you tell us where is Skye Bioscience is located, and how many people are at the company currently?
Yeah, we're headquartered in San Diego, so we're a U.S.-based company, and we have operations kind of spread throughout between West Coast and East Coast. So all of our staff the majority of our staff is kind of between those two geographies. We have also some research that is being done in Europe that we work closely with a CRO there. And then our CRO, all of our clinical trials are currently being done in the U.S. Approximately, I think, 11 employees now, and we plan on remaining fairly lean. We have a very experienced team that has been involved in drug development for quite some time. So we've been involved in different drugs that have kind of moved through different phases of development. I think from overlapping in terms of the company, a lot of us have experience in terms of bringing drugs to the IND phase, and then others we've been involved in phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials, as well as pre-marketing studies. So very good cross-section of experience, and then we're complemented by our board, who has been involved in a lot of different drug approvals.
Great. And just wondering, are there any upcoming milestones or key events that the company is looking forward to in 2024?
Yeah, there's a very exciting clinical calendar ahead of us. So I think the 2023 really set the stage for our drugs kind of moving through the clinical milestones, namely concluding phase 1 clinical trials for the healthy volunteer study for our glaucoma program. And now we're moving and we're enrolling on our phase 2 study for glaucoma. So there will be The first clinical readout related to that phase 2 program is an interim clinical readout approximately in Q1 of 2024. And then we will also expect to have final data in late Q2 of 2024. And then we've just announced last week initiation of, or we filed an IND for a new indication for nimacimab, which is targeting chronic kidney disease patients that are obese. There's a big unmet need there in terms of those patients looking to see how we can help with disease management there and improving some of the associated modifiers that we're looking for, namely weight loss as well as improvement in kidney function. And what we believe is a very complementary in terms of the current treatment paradigm that we're starting to see with some of the other enthusiasm and positive data that's come out of the incretin hormone therapies that are out there, like the GLP-1 therapies.
Yeah, Punit, can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because I know that there's been a lot of news and talk about like the new obesity pharma market, basically. And in your opinion, like what are the current unmet medical needs there?
Yeah, that's great that we're kind of getting into that. So I think like for us, one of the key things that we did in 2023 was add nimacimab to our clinical pipeline. So that was through an acquisition we concluded in August of Birdrock Bio. That's a phase 2. Nimacimab is a phase 2 ready asset. And by filing the IND that we did, we are really locked and loaded to show how nimacimab can be a very complementary drug or pathway to some of the existing drugs out there, such as the GLP-1s or other incretin regimens in obesity, as well as some of the related comorbidities, such as chronic kidney disease or type 2 diabetes. So that's one of the key angles, is that the current drugs are not the be and all in terms of the mechanism. We think that there's a really important component of an add-on therapy, such as nimacimab, in terms of helping with weight management and some of the other related metabolic disorders. And primarily the three things that kind of stick out from the mechanism is well, one, lipid metabolism. So it's stimulating the brown adipose tissue activity. Two is just glucose metabolism. So it's really improving the insulin sensitivity and other glucose metabolism. And then third is appetite regulation. So you're able to control these other hormones like leptin and ghrelin, which are key components. So this particular drug that we're developing, we think is a really complementary with the existing treatment paradigm.
So just curious, are you and is Skye Biosciences actively engaging in any business development discussions, or are there any plans to expand the pipeline further?
Yeah, so we're certainly opening doors to companies who could potentially have interest in our products and our technology, and especially in the future. Currently, we've been focused on executing on our clinical programs. But naturally, as a healthcare or life science company, we're always interested in creating awareness around our products and how we can ultimately get to the patients. And that's the objective here, is to eventually commercialize. So we're going to continue exploring opportunities to further that effort to commercialize the drugs, as well as expand our pipeline. Anything that helps to enable growth of what we're doing and advancing quickly, or the innovation that's necessary for patients dealing with these conditions is important to us. We've been creative along the way. So this year we did an acquisition where we have quickly moved that into clinical development. That program I referenced that's focusing on kidney disease and obesity is slated to begin in the first half of 2024. And then we also did a outside of US or ex-US licensing deal focused on chronic pain that's utilizing the API that we're developing for glaucoma. So we've continued to be focused on patients first, and that is important to us in terms of getting our therapies out there, or the potential of our therapies to benefit patients.
And so I wanted to ask you, I know that you mentioned that there is a growing interest in cannabinoid-based therapies. Where do you see this field heading in the next 5 years or in the next 10 years?
I think it's all driven by the research, so more companies like Skye that are continuing to advance the science of this particular pathway and related drugs or new medicine that can target the different types of receptors that are located in the endocannabinoid system are important. We purposely kind of chose areas that we think we can move the needle. First, it was in the ophthalmology space where the eye is rich with these receptors, and now with nimacimab more broadly by focusing on a particular drug that's targeting the periphery and CB1 receptor in the periphery. So more research is really going to ultimately drive the growing interest in that area. I think when you look at the macro picture, that's a necessary thing because intellectual property is the currency that this industry really relies on for continuing to get new medicines out there and innovate. So the endocannabinoid system, I think, offers a pretty open greenfield of opportunity there in terms of creating new medicine. I think there has to be, continued to see additional, validation of the different types of targets that you can go after. CB1 is certainly laying out kind of a good foundation to rely on from a science rationale, from a safety rationale, and hopefully now efficacy in these diseases that we're focusing.
Great. And Punit, to wrap up the discussion, I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs, especially those who want to venture into the biotech or pharma industry?
Yeah, I would say don't be scared of going after the life sciences industry. I think that was a big thing that kind of resonated with me. I'm a non-scientist entrepreneur, but have certainly been in the industry and taken the time to learn about the kind of the different drugs we're working on and the understanding the science that's supporting our development strategy. I think that there's been sometimes a reluctance around the kind of the risk appetite associated with entrepreneurism in life sciences, but I think there's still so much to be discovered and a lot to make a difference in this particular area. So I've been a big proponent for young entrepreneurs to be open-minded, and now I think there's a lot of cool tools out there and a lot of good resources out there to help continue to broaden that research and opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, Punit, for being on the show today. I greatly appreciate your time and the insightful discussion.
Thank you, Vera.
And that's the end of this week's episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you liked today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you enjoyed our discussions today, please share the episode with your friends and colleagues, and be sure to subscribe in order to be notified when a new episode is released. To join in on the discussion, you can find Xtalks on social media, email podcast@xtalks.com, or comment on the articles directly. Links are in the show description. Take a moment to join our community at xtalks.com to get access to everything we have to offer, including webinars, job listings, virtual meetings, articles, and more. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast are those of the speakers sharing them. They should not be taken as professional advice and do not necessarily reflect the policy or position Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.